Our next presentation brings a story of how McKinsey & Company has successfully applied production control to address significant challenges in construction. I invite Jim Banaszak. Oh, here we go, Jim. Thank you.
Hello, Roberto.
We can see you and we can hear you. That's great. So please let me introduce Jim. Jim is an expert partner for major projects in the capital productivity and infrastructure practice at McKinsey & Company. He is a member of the firm's global energy, materials, retail, and high-tech project delivery service lines. Jim earned a Master of Science in Environmental Engineering at the Illinois Institute of Technology, and he holds a PhD in Civil and Environmental Engineering from Northwestern University. I actually know Jim from quite some time, and he's the kind of guy with numerous stories to tell. And in addition of being, of course, very, very passionate about improving project performance. So I invite you all to hear one of his stories. Thank you for being with us, Jim, and please proceed to share your screen, and it will be over to you.
All right, let's see how this goes. Thanks, Roberto. Can everyone see that?
Yes, we confirm we can see it. It's all yours.
Excellent. Thanks, Roberto. Thanks, everyone, for joining this afternoon. A real pleasure to speak to all of you. As Roberto mentioned, I'm going to tell a story about an engagement that we had really the end of, let's say, the middle to end of 2019, moving into the early parts of 2020. The timing will be important, as you'll hear in a second. This is how we applied production control to a project recovery situation. So let me just set the context for this situation. So this was a long-standing client of ours. They were building a new facility in a location where they already had 3 operating facilities. So this was nothing new for them. There was a tiny piece of new technology going into this facility, but it was really just an improvement over what they currently were operating on the site. But the situation was such that because of this new little piece of technology and because of the markets that they sell into, they had to have the product coming out of this facility approved by their customers. And the test cycle for their customers only occurred once a year. So I'm sure many of you are familiar with this type of situation. You put a product out into the market, your customers want to test it, they want to qualify a new facility or whatever you might call it. That was the situation that we had here. It just so happened that the qualification only happened once a year, and that would be the second quarter of 2020. So we had the first thing that we need whenever we take on a project recovery, we had a clear objective. And that objective was to get the facility operating by the first quarter of 2020. We're talking now, you'll see we're starting back in May, April of 2019. I think the second objective is to figure out where you are, and that's what we're going to talk about here, and then how to achieve the objective as you see at the bottom. A couple of the other challenges that really caused the client to give us a call. Although this was a facility they had done in the past using technology they were familiar with, the OEM manufacturer and some of their sub-suppliers actually was having trouble meeting production targets. And therefore, the equipment was actually arriving late. It was arriving out of sequence. Sometimes was not arriving at all, which we'll get into in a second. And of course, as everyone knows on these types of projects with a lot of process equipment, you're always going to have the issues where something is broken, doesn't fit, has to be slightly modified or repaired. That was just par for the course. But the real root cause here was the out of sequence and late delivery of equipment. When we got to the site, the team was really not set up for this. The team was set up to do a cookie cutter approach to something that had been done 3 times before. The expectation was that everyone whom they had worked with before was going to be ready and perform on the project. When that didn't happen, things started slipping. And by the time we were called in and able to assess the project, we actually had a go forward schedule that said the project probably would not have been complete until July or August of 2020. So missing the window. Just to ground everyone here, we're really talking about production system control when we talk about a project recovery. We don't have the opportunity to map the process from the beginning, try to optimize sequencing of activities. We're really, handed the situation that we're handed. And, we have to start with that reality and then start chipping away at opportunities to actually improve the situation. So where do you start in this situation? You always start with the site walk, right? And we started with the site walk, noticed quite a few things about what was going on at the project. The project was not, disaster in the sense that it was, unmanaged, unkempt or anything like that. It actually looked like a well-run project for what was going on. But we did see quite a few issues associated with the setup that I gave you in the context that I started with. A lot of what we saw, you could classify as work in progress or inventory of work. I mean, if I don't know if you can see actually this pump battery, it's actually well put together except for the fact that the flow meters are missing out of sequence equipment. And, we saw many examples of this. Obviously, if you were to do an earned value on this picture on the left, I think we would all agree it's 99% complete, right? But not ready to do anything with. We saw this over and over again. We asked the question, so where are the meters? We got one of several possible answers. They're still at the factory. They're on the ship somewhere over the ocean. They'll be here soon. Or we can't find them. They've said they've arrived. And they're out there somewhere. And out there somewhere was the laydown yard where there was significant inventory material. So in addition to the inventory of work that was going on, because of the out of sequence delivery and the inability for folks to actually align the delivery of machinery and supplies to the project, there was a significant buildup of materials out in the laydown yard. And we'll talk about that some more. So, opportunities to improve for sure. Let's go to the next slide. I think this one's familiar to all of you. This is basically, the process for production system control, 5 major steps, nice linear process. We agree with all these steps. When you get into a project recovery situation, you have to run some of these in parallel. So the way we approach this is first, as I mentioned, align on the business objectives. So I already told you that this facility had to produce a test product by Q2, ideally end of Q1 of 2020. What does that mean? That means you don't need sheeting on the building. It means you might need utilities. You certainly don't need a crane. You can pick things up with a forklift or move them some other way, but you need the process operating. So our focus started on production, scheduling, planning, and execution for the process. So that was one piece of what the team started working on. The second piece the team started working on was thinking about how can we get ahead of this situation. And that's where standard process mapping and actual production planning can work in parallel with the 3 middle steps and actually help the team get ahead. So I think of the middle 3 steps as figuring out what the problem is, the closest problem that you have today. What is your today problem, and fixing that to the extent that you can, and tackle the next one, Root cause identification, mitigation, move to the next one. The process mapping, I think of the opportunity to get the team ahead. So look 3 problems ahead and try to solve that one as well. So, but the time we get to that 4th problem, we've already solved it. And since we've solved our daily, weekly problems, by the time we mesh with the future problems, that's actually where you get the dramatic improvement that we were able to achieve. So I'm just going to walk very quickly through, the 5 steps, again, not in the order that you see here, right? Just based on the explanation I gave you. So Production meetings, where are we? This is basically how bad are things? What's the problem? I think most of you have seen charts like this already during this session. We started at the beginning, right? 3-week look ahead, daily planning sessions, meet in the afternoon. How much did we get done? As no one will be surprised at this point, I think, in this session to see, initially we're at 48% commitment reliability the first week that we started measuring. You could see this growing over time. A lot of folks say, well, that's because the folks on the ground here are starting to figure out the game and they just promise less. Sure, there's some of that going on. But they also see that as they start identifying root causes, so the root causes you see here at the bottom right, and folks actually are assigned to and start fixing those root causes, these folks on the left start to believe that they can actually improve things. And yeah, they may pull back on what they promise each other and commit to, but they also realize that in the grand scheme of things, if this project is going to be successful, if we're going to meet the objectives, at some point we have to meet production targets every week or every month or every day. And the only way we're going to do that is by committing to getting work done to each other and improving our reliability on those commitments. So when we started measuring, as I introduced, not enough materials. Really, it's kind of vague, but it was a start. So it at least let us identify the first root cause of the problem of why this project was late, and that was inability to either find or lack of materials on site. So we went one step deeper. We now started mapping out activity networks for certain pieces of work. So again, only focus on critical path work, mainly focused on process and the distinct system turnover steps that will be required to get to commissioning, to get a product out the door by the end of the first quarter. As you can see here, we started in May. Initially, the team was really, unwilling to commit to deadlines because, they understood the situation on the ground. But as they started to see things improve, and as we started to identify additional root causes of issues, so, materials number one, but really, what was the root cause of materials not being right? Well, some of the engineering wasn't done, which was a new root cause. So this enabled us to actually bring additional engineers in a targeted fashion to get ahead of some of the in-field engineering that needed to be done for some of the mechanical systems. We also identified that's very specific pieces of pipe spools. Happens to everyone on every one of their projects, I'm sure. We're coming in an out of sequence fashion. So we dispatched the team to South America to the facility that was fabricating spools, identified the issue was really not spool fabrication. They also had a huge laydown yard, pipe spools everywhere. It was painting. And they only had one paint facility, one had broken down, and that was putting the whole process behind schedule. So we worked out a way to ship half of that volume to another paint facility, paint the spools in parallel, and actually have them arrive on site in a specific sequence, solving that problem. On to the next one. On to the next one being engineering in June, July, predecessor tasks. By August, the team was, really in sync regarding commitment reliability and what they were promising each other. What they now realized was possible based on what was known at the time for the project. As I said, root cause after root cause after root cause. As we move from the pipe situation, we now realize that as we got pipes on site, we still cannot hit our productivity targets. And as we continued to do our production control meetings, we identified the root cause of that is the inability for the predecessor activity which was structural, putting up handrail and putting up structural platforms. That predecessor activity actually was what was holding up pipe spool installation. So again, move to the left, right? Move to the left. Predecessor activity, we actually identified the root cause of that problem being that we didn't have enough structural folks on site. So we were able to come up with a compensation package improvement that improved the retention of those folks on site. We actually applied that also to the pipe fitters because we knew that would potentially become an issue. And we applied the same package to the electrician because electricians were going to be next, and we knew that was going to be the next big hill to climb. So again, root cause identification, rapid mitigation to the extent possible of the root causes. Now we're getting into a situation where we were, if you remember, I introduced the thought of the two parallel paths, right? I call it almost the brute force method of in-field productivity enhancement and commitment reliability enhancement, and now the ability to plan and get ahead, right? As we are able to start planning and getting ahead, we now are able to look 5 or 10 steps into the future and identify a very specific component installation on the critical path that actually was going to be the activity that either made or broke this project. And there were 100 of these components, very sizable. Required a significant amount of rigging and crane action to get into place. And remember, just given the situation of the project, these cranes were used by other trades, was somewhat limited workspace as far as laydown and area. So there was a lot of work that was going to have to be coordinated to install these components at the same time as some of our other activities. By this point, pipe fitting and electrical work were happening at the same time as these components installation. So this ability to plan and get ahead allowed us to orchestrate the movement and installation of these components in off shifts, off days, weekends, and work around the other activities such that we were able to mitigate this risk before it even happened. So the installation, we were able to predict the number of components that had to be installed per day. We were able to practice their installation. We were able to measure how long the installation took, identify opportunities to improve it, bring that installation time down to a suitable level where we knew that we would make it for the project, and actually implement those changes and implement that schedule and implement that production mapping in such a way that we were able to get this work done in time to meet the objective. There's other things that have to happen. Yep. One more after this.
Couple of minutes.
Yep.
Okay. Sure.
Other things have to happen. Folks often ask about the contract. The contract in this situation was not an impediment, but the makeup of the project team from the owner side and for the rest of the parties actually was an impediment to getting work done and getting the situation improved. As you can see on the left-hand side of this, very small project delivery organization that we expanded quite substantially, where we had folks assigned to each specific system area of construction. We looked ahead and knew the commissioning ultimately was going to be the thing that got us to victory. So we assigned a commissioning lead to start working with the folks on the left in such a way that we could pre-commission, we could build commissioning process flow diagram. We could actually anticipate the things that were going to have to happen during commissioning while there was still substantial work being done outside of the process, and anticipate any delays or overlaps with logistics. We assigned a materials coordinator for obvious reasons to make sure we knew where everything was and when it was coming in. And we assigned an engineering lead to improve the delivery of the outstanding engineering that I mentioned was an issue. So with that, I thought I would just put this slide up. I know it's time for questions. This might be a thought starter for folks. We often get the question, what changes day to day when you implement project production control on a project, either from the beginning or in a turnaround situation? I hope I gave you some examples of how things change for the folks on the ground, but here's a little more structured summary of what changes for the folks that are actually working on the project when you implement project production control. And with that, thanks again for joining the session, and I look forward to your questions.
Excellent, Gene. Thank you so much. What an interesting story, because you have shared with us how you started in construction, but it seems you started moving backwards and going to supply and even engineering, right?
Exactly.
So I think that our audience really grasp that element of your story, because at the end of the day, you implemented this on a project that was up and running, right?
That's right.
But look, we have some questions for you, and the first question is, it says, Jim, any thoughts why the owner's project staff didn't seem to have the know-how or perhaps willingness to get into the detailed flow management activities on this project? and then this person in the audience follows with, is this common?
Roberto, you and I think have talked about this a lot, but I would say yes, it's common. I think many of our owner clients take a hands-off approach with their construction projects, and some for good reason. Some it's a simple project. It's something they've done 100 times before. It perhaps is a package plant of some type. But for most of the people in this audience, I don't think you have those types of projects. And this would have been that project. It would have been that project had the material been delivered on time. But as soon as things start getting out of whack, it's very hard for a team that's not used to issues occurring with construction to really identify root causes and actually stand up, raise their hand, and say, "Boy, this could get really bad, and we need to fix it now." And I think it's like standing at the switch when the train passes you by, right? You have that one opportunity to course correct, and if the train passes you before you flip the switch, you can get very far behind very quickly, right? And I think that's really the situation that happened here. The other thing I'll say is a lot of our clients say, "Hey, I signed a lump sum contract, and my contractor is going to take care of it."
Yeah.
That sometimes works.
Excellent. So look, we do have here a couple more questions that I think will be of interest to you and our audience. One question refers to, it says the following: did you discontinue the use of other processes or systems? It's like two questions in one, by the way. I repeat, did you discontinue the use of other processes and systems, or was PPM or production control implemented to close a specific gap in the way they were doing things? If so, what was that gap?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think so yes and no. I think we repurposed many of the meetings that had already been occurring. And if you go on any project, they have a daily meeting. Sometimes, given this one was somewhat in distress, they actually had twice daily meetings where they were trying to resolve issues. But nothing was really getting done, right? Because they didn't have the fact base to know what to look for, right? So we repurposed those meetings to start talking about the facts that we were generating very quickly. You saw the very first chart, week 1, week 2. By week 2, we knew what problem number 1 was. By week 5, we knew what problem number 2 was, right? So we started repurposing those meetings to actually talk about those issues. And the meetings quickly became updates on mitigation strategies, because rather than bring the issues to the meeting and assign someone to go look at it and come back and report at it, report tomorrow, we actually set up teams to go resolve the issue and come back to me Friday and tell me what your mitigation plan is, right? So we just repurpose those meetings to actually focus on problem solving as opposed to reporting.
Excellent. So there's one more question here, and we need to wrap it up. And
okay.
This question seems to be a bit, it's not necessarily related to this particular experience, but it's more about for you as a member of McKinsey, what have you seen in other places? The question is, I'm assuming McKinsey is doing PPM in other places. What are you learning overall?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I've been involved now with PPI. I think I joined my first session 4 years ago, and I've had several opportunities to implement it. Most often in this type of situation, in a turnaround where we know it works. It's really the way that we do it. What's changed mostly for me now is when I walk to a project site, I look at different things than I used to look at. And when I talk to project professionals, and I would say this more broadly across McKinsey, we start with production thinking, and then try to back away with our clients. How far away are they from the optimum, which is fully a full-blown implementation of PPM, and use that actually as a way to predict potential issues that might occur with that project. So now we start with production thinking. I think that's the big change for me, and I would say for many of my colleagues is we start with that type of thinking as a way to assess what's possible, and then identify gaps from there.
Excellent, Gene. Thank you so much. We run out of time, although you got, by the way, several other questions. It looked like you generated a lot of interest in our audience. So I want to, on behalf of PPI, thank you so much for joining us today. It was great to hear one more of your stories. I know, again, you have many of these, and very, very nice to see you. And thank you again for sharing the message. We need now, Jim, to transition to our next speaker. So
take care, Roberto.
Take care.